Good evening, viewer. Welcome to our Glory Club TV. Here's the breaking news. Yes, as Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen meet Xi Jinping, they will be sending a message of unity even as China seeks to exploit potential cracks in Europe's alliances. The French president and the head of the European Commission flew into Beijing on Wednesday and will be welcomed by the Chinese president on Thursday. Yes, their joint trip is the latest is a noticeable push from European leaders to engage with China, which has seen German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Spanish PM Pedro Sanchez paying visits in recent months. Like them, Mr. Macron and Ms. von der Leyen will be pressing Mr. Xi on taking further steps to halt the Ukraine war while also financing the increasingly fraught trade relationship between the European Union and China, its biggest trading partner. European watchers expect them to work as a tag in on the Chinese. With his attempts at engaging Vladimir Putin, the French president is likely to play the good cop, and Elysee Palace spokesman told reporters that Mr. Macron found points of convergence with Chinese proposals on ending the war. Meanwhile, some have called Ms. von der Leyen the bad cop from Brussels, given her strong relationship with US President Joe Biden and vocal support for NATO's position. Days before her arrival, Mrs. von der Leyen gave a strongly worded speech criticizing Mr. Xi for maintaining his friendship with Mr. Putin. In a reference to China's 12-point peace plan, she stressed that any plan consolidating Russian annexation was simply not viable. She also pushed the concept of de-risking, a more moderate version of the US idea of de-occupying from China, where Europe would talk tougher in diplomacy, diversify its trade sources and protect its trades and technology. Together, the leaders represent two fairly different strands of European thinking on China, and said Dr. Andrew Small, a senior fellow with think tank and German Marshall Fund. One is on China deepening support for Putin on the world, especially on the question of lethal aid. They will want to say at a minimum that it will be damaging to the entire relationship with Europe, but with Mr. Macron coming with a large delegation including business leaders, there is also the commercial and economic relationship that continues even in the middle of these. The message is that Europe and France still want to do business. Crucially, Mrs. von der Leyen is in China at Mr. Macron's invitation. This would provide the assurance that they would hold the line, noted Dr. Small, not only to EU member states skeptical of Mr. Macron's approach to Russia and China, but also to the Americans who would be watching closely. The US has yet to meet the Chinese leadership since Secretary of State Antony Blinken's March anticipated trip to Beijing was called off during the spy balloon row. This trip may be the closest the Americans to get to FaceTime with Mr. Xi for now, and just before leaving France, Mr. Macron spoke to Joe Biden where they discussed plans to engage China. Mr. Macron and Ms. von der Leyen's source of unity is also an attempt to put paid to any Chinese hopes of exploiting differences within Europe. Some observers believe this is one goal of Beijing as it tries to woo parts of Europe away from the US orbit. But with member states maintaining relationships of varying degrees of closeness to China, the EU has yet to come up with a clear consensus on how to handle Beijing. Some like France and Germany, are more keen to preserve trade ties, while others, particularly former Soviet bloc states, nervous about Russia looking to claim other territories after Ukraine, will want to go harder on China. The danger is that China may be emboldened to use its relationship with Russia as leverage over Euro-born observers. Rather than just follow the US and NATO's lead, Europe must clearly draw their own red line and lay out the consequences of China overstepping it, said Janka Ortel, Director of the Asia Program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. The Chinese really need to understand what they stakes. This is an opportunity for Europeans to say, this is your problem. You could have stayed away like in 2014 during Russia's annexation of Crimea, but you choose not to, so you own this, said Dr. Ortel. So how could China likely respond? Ms. von der Leyen would be greeted with wariness. Her speech last week needled the Chinese, eliciting a swift retort from their ambassador to the EU, Fu Kong, who said it contained a lot of mispresentation and misinterpretation and it deliberately distorted Chinese position. China would not be keen on a concept of de-risking, but it may have no choice but to accept it, say experts. In any case, it may be hard to China to protest given its own efforts to become more economically self-sufficient, with Mr. Xi championing his own dual circulation strategy. The Chinese also do not want to be caught in a situation where they are too dependent on the US or the Russians, said Ruben Wrong, an associate professor in political science who studies Asia-Europe relations at the National University of Singapore. Stoked by the word, the growing unity among Western allies underscored by Finland joining NATO on Tuesday represent a serious development in foreign relations for China, leaving very little room for them to take an unyielding position, said Wu Wang, a Beijing-based independent political consultant. Behind the report, Glory Globe TV, Delhi, India.